I love little charming indie movies. They're just so delightful. The Farewell is another small indie movie that was produced by the A24 movie company, and they've made a lot of other great movies like Hereditary last year, The Florida Project, Room, and the Best Picture winner actually Moonlight. I like A24 a lot because they focus on these really small budget movies that wouldn't necessarily be like front and center in the front of production companies' minds to make. They are very interesting, very powerful, character-driven movies that have very interesting and simple concepts, but they always harken at like things behind humanity that I think are really interesting, and that I think that they do a really cool job finding some creative filmmakers to do work there. And The Farewell is another great example of one of those movies. The Farewell is about a girl in her 20s who's a Chinese American and who is really close with her Chinese grandmother, and she finds out that her grandmother is actually dying of stage 4 lung cancer. Now, her family immigrated from China to America when she was very young, but most of her family still lives in China. And it's a custom in China to not tell your elders when they're dying of a terminal illness. And this is supposed to relieve the burden of them while they're dying of having to stress and worry about it. It just brings into question her own ideals and also just how the East and the West both kind of view our individual thoughts and how we play into the society around us. I thought that this was a very interesting concept and movie. I definitely have my own opinion of whether you should tell someone whether they're dying of an illness or not, but in general, I thought this was a really cool concept that they delved into. These interesting concepts that are brought up in The Farewell are also supported by some great performances by all the actors in the movie. Awkwafina did a great job as a lead character in this movie. She usually plays comedic characters and someone who's very loud and obnoxious kind of, but in this movie, her performance is just very subtle and it's just very nuanced in how she interacts with all the people around her and all the members of her family. And each relationship she has with people in her family is unique. Bright points were definitely her interactions with her parents, and then also especially with her grandma. And speaking of the grandma was really great in this movie. She was really funny. She drove a lot of the comedic parts of this movie, and she reminds me a lot of my grandma. You know, she's like always so disciplined and doing her exercises and telling you how you should live her life, and very, very wise. I thought that that was a really great way to portray her in this movie. It's very realistic. And this movie is based on a true story, so makes sense that it'd be accurate. Along with the acting, all the technical elements of this movie are spot on perfect. The lighting was great. The cinematography along with the lighting was terrific. Everything was super, super pretty, and they have these really cool like purple washed shots in a lot of these parts of the movie. But then they also have parts that really show the grunginess of China a little bit. And not to beg on China, but they do have like a lot of smog. They captured it pretty honestly and well, and also kind of giving it that lived-in feel. And when Awkwafina, her character, is back in China, she kind of has some memories of when she went to go see her grandma, and she could kind of see these landmarks that weren't necessarily like over the top, but you can tell that they were just one of those things that, yeah, I would remember that, and it just made the movie feel a lot more personal in that way. And like I said, the acting in this movie is terrific. Each and every one of these characters is very unique, and it makes it, when they cohabitate, just really interesting how they kind of jabber back and forth with each other. They argue, they fight, they are really struggling with this big problem that they have throughout the movie, and just seeing how each of them is feeling about it and how they all have like their own ways that they're coping and their own flaws, it just makes for a very realistic family kind of dynamic. And to top off all the great technical attributes of this movie is a great score and great music. It has a lot of great piano in it, which I love. Now, to go off track here for just a second, I want to commend the directors and writers of this movie for what they did. Now, I don't really want to get political in any of my videos. I really want to focus on making this space just a very unifying atmosphere where we can all just kind of like stop what we're doing. Doesn't matter where we come from. We can all just enjoy this sort of entertainment space together and find something in common. Unfortunately, a lot of people still use movies in this sort of medium as a way to demonize certain people and to still drive people apart, and that kind of sucks. But the great thing about this movie is that although that it's based around a minority group and it's female-led, they don't really hit you over the head with that or tell you about how virtuous they are for doing it. This movie is wholly honest to the Chinese culture and also the Chinese kind of American culture and showing how they are different. And I really appreciate that. I obviously don't agree with the main premise of this movie of not telling someone that they're dying of stage 4 lung cancer and they're terminally ill. I wholly disagree with that. And there are a couple other things that people say I disagree with, but that's what I love about having an honest movie and an honest kind of character in it, is that as long as you keep these kind of flaws and sort of ideas towards characters, it makes a lot more sense to me, because all of us are different. We all have different things that we think, and none of us believe like the same exact thing usually. And I think that that is way more honest to have characters like that. Now, a lot of times in movies, they all have the same sort of idea that whatever the director or the writer is trying to get you to believe, or whatever kind of thought they're trying to push. But in this movie, they kept it to each character and had them feel like their own independent person, which I thought is a way better way to do it. And again, I just want to commend the directors and the writers for this movie, because it's great that we get to see something like this Chinese American's like family story. And it is very interesting to people like me who aren't necessarily around that all the time. It just allows us to see something different, but it also doesn't have to like demonize people and tell us that we're evil, because we're not like that. With all that being said, I really love The Farewell, and I'm going to give The Farewell a 10 out of 10. Thank you guys for watching my video. I really do appreciate it. I'm going to be coming out with something very different on my channel. I'm going to be changing the grading scale from the numbers that I use now to actually a classification. So it gives it more of a description. It tells you a little bit more about what I'm actually saying when I'm grading this movie, instead of it just being a number. And I think that'll be just a wholly more entertaining way for me to give you my thoughts on the movie. Anyways, press the subscribe button, press the notification button, like the video, tell your friends about my channel, follow me on Instagram @JaredGilster, and come back here next time, and I'll see you then.